radio program hosted by Steve Gregg. Steve is not in the studio today, so calls from listeners will not be able to be taken. In the place of the usual format, we put together some of the best calls from past programs. They cover a variety of topics important to anyone interested in the Bible and Christianity. In addition to the radio program, The Narrow Path has a website you can go to, www.thenarrowpath.com, where you can find hundreds of resources that can all be downloaded for free. And now, please enjoy this special collection of calls to Steve Gregg and The Narrow Path.
All right, our next caller is Juan from Phoenix, Arizona. Juan, welcome to The Narrow Path. Thanks for calling.
Hello. This is the first time I call. I'm actually a radio fan, but I want to ask a question. I had write stuff concerning the Bible on my Facebook, and I had this lady write to abstain from blood was not to get blood transfusions. I didn't agree with what she said. I was thinking more like what I read on the Bible is don't eat blood. I just wanted to hear what,
Yeah,
about that.
This lady may have been a Jehovah's Witness. At least
I think she wasn't, and that's what was kind of weird.
Okay.
Because, I have a lot of Christian friends of mine, and they were kind of agreeing with what she was saying, but I don't think they read their Bibles right.
Right. Well, the Jehovah's Witnesses have this as an official doctrine, that they will not get blood transfusions. There may be other people who are not Jehovah's Witnesses who have been maybe influenced. After all, JWs have been to all of our houses many times, and I'm sure a lot of Christians have heard these things and don't know how to answer them. So sometimes people who don't even become Jehovah's Witnesses just pick up some of the ideas that the Jehovah's Witnesses bring out because they don't know how to refute them, and they say, I guess that's probably true at that point. And what they're referring to is the fact that in Acts chapter 15, the Jerusalem Council met to decide whether Gentile believers would have to keep the law of Moses or not. The council decided that that would not be necessary, that the Gentile believers did not have. But there were a few things that were offensive to Jews. And in to offending Jews, they wanted to urge the Gentiles to avoid those few things that Jews had sensitivities about that Gentiles often did not. That included eating meat sacrificed to idols. That included eating animals that had been strangled, and eating blood, and of course fornication, which was very common among Gentiles. And so, when it says we're to abstain from blood, the Jehovah's Witnesses understand this to mean to abstain from blood transfusions. Of course, the apostles had no concept of blood transfusions. That technology did not exist. They didn't have intravenous things going on in their medical care like we do now. And therefore, there's no possibility that the apostles, when they said to abstain from blood, meant abstain from blood transfusions. On the other hand, a Jehovah's Witness might argue that if it's wrong to eat blood, which is certainly what is implied in the statement in the Bible, then how could it be right to intravenously eat blood, as it were, to put it into your veins? And that this would be wrong, they would say. Now, this is what we call extrapolation from the text. The text says it's wrong to eat blood, or that the Gentiles should abstain from eating blood. But one could extrapolate, well, ingesting blood, whether it's through your mouth or through your veins or through some other means, it's all the same, and we should abstain from blood. Now, I can't really argue except to say that extrapolation is not necessarily anticipated by the authors of that decree. Eating blood in their day was not necessary. You could drain the blood out of an animal, and the main reason for them not eating blood was to avoid offending Jews. It was not a moral obligation, because Jesus said it's not what goes into your mouth that defiles a man anyway. It's what comes out of his mouth, comes out of his heart. That's what defiles a man. So what you eat doesn't defile you. There's no immoral food. But they were asking the Gentiles to avoid eating blood because it offended the Jewish people. Now, I don't know, but of course receiving blood would still probably offend Jewish people, and if you're around Jewish people, probably you shouldn't do it if they're observant Jews. But blood transfusions is an entirely different question. You only give blood transfusions to save somebody's life. This is you never ate blood to save life. You ate blood because you were careless about draining the blood and you weren't being ritually clean. It's a different matter altogether if you try to save somebody's life, that you can donate blood and they can have your blood and then they'll live and they won't die. Many Jehovah's Witnesses have died in hospitals where they could have been saved if they had received blood transfusions, but they wouldn't. They wouldn't receive them. And so they died. Now, I guess I can appreciate a person having such strong convictions that they would rather die than violate their convictions. I don't think that's all that bad. He that seeks to save his life shall lose it, and he that loses his life for my sake shall find it. However, while I might be willing to die for my convictions, I would not be willing to impose those convictions on others without biblical warrant so that they might die. If I influence them and tell them, you can't do this, don't take a blood transfusion, and then they die, and they died because I made them think that way, I would feel pretty bad, because the Bible does not say anything about blood transfusions, and therefore to forbid it, and that someone die as a result, would seemingly put some guilt upon me. And it would certainly put the burden of proof upon me. Because the instructions I gave them are agreeable with what the Bible intended to say. And I don't think you can do that in that passage.
Yeah, that's what I was because my wife always appreciates and she gets blood transfusion, and she's just saying that's wrong, and I just thought that it wasn't what things actually meant in the Bible, and that was it. I just didn't really want to argue too much on that.
You're right. They're not talking about blood transfusions in that passage.
Okay, well, thank you for answering my questions, and God bless you. Thank you.
Juan, it's good to have you as a first-time caller. Call again sometime.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye now. All right, we're going to talk to Eric from California. Eric, welcome to the No Path. Thanks for calling.
Thank you. How you doing?
Good.
All right. Well, hey, so I wanted to ask you a little bit about if you've had any experiences with reviewing medical studies for the efficacy of prayer.
Well, no, I don't review those things. I've seen headlines from time to time showing that people who are prayed for recover from their sickness more readily than those who are not prayed for, and things like that. I don't know the statistics, and I don't know the value of the studies, whether they were well done or not. Have you studied that?
Some of them, yeah. And the numbers, most of the time they show a negative result. There's no statistical difference. It has been shown that prayer can lead to lowering blood pressure. Same kind of effect as if someone's meditating or something.
Yeah, meditation does the same thing, yeah.
Right, yeah, but some of them have been pretty serious. One was a study done over 3,000 patients that were getting coronary bypass surgery.
Uh-huh.
And they had a control group, or it's controlled as you can be, because, you can't count for, maybe they have a family member somewhere that says a prayer for them that you don't know about, but...
Sure.
I was raised a Christian, and, I don't know, I've just been having some doubts about...
Well, let me just say, first of all, I'd be very curious to know if they've done similar studies in third world countries, or if they were just done in Western nations. I think that actual miraculous healings are reported far more and far more reliably, in my opinion, in third world countries. I think on the mission field we see far more of the miraculous than we see in the Western world. And there's reasons that we can explore about why that would be. But I would say this also. I'm not surprised by the results, because I believe that if God wants somebody to get well, they'll get well. If He doesn't want them to, they won't. And of course, God knows that all of us are going to die sometime, and so some of us are going to die sick, and some are going to die other ways. But I don't think the Bible promises that if we pray for healing, we're always going to get a healing. I know of some cases of people who are healed, and they were prayed for. I also know of some people who get better who weren't prayed for, and seem to get better. So a certain percentage of people will get better whether they're prayed for or not. And then a certain percentage of people seem to get healed in association with specific prayer. But we don't know how many of them would have gotten healed without the prayer. And we don't know how many people who died without prayer might have been healed if they were prayed for. There's no way to really know this, and nor do I care, because I don't see the purpose of prayer as primarily to get healed or to get anything for myself. I believe that faith is in God's character, not in his running to our aid for everything we wish to have. And sometimes getting better isn't what he wants for us. When you think about it, Jesus was approached by the sisters of Lazarus when he was very sick. And they said, your friend Lazarus is very sick. Obviously they were hoping he would come and heal him. Jesus didn't. He just waited around and waited for Lazarus to die. It was a great disappointment to his sisters. And when Jesus saw them, they said, if you were here, my brother wouldn't have died. And of course that's correct. He probably would have healed him if he had been there. That's why he didn't go. He wanted Lazarus to die. Of course, in this case, he had something better in mind. He was going to raise him from the dead, and he did, which was even better than healing him. But that simply shows that healing isn't the best thing that can happen in every case. There may be other things God would like to do rather than heal. It doesn't always mean he's going to raise them from the dead, although all Christians will rise from the dead someday, but it may mean that he has something else he wants to accomplish through their death. And we are going to die. So to me, I don't think that prayer is a way of manipulating God to get, the things you want. I believe prayer is primarily focused on your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And when people try to use prayer for something that's somewhat more self-interested, I think they're not using prayer in a biblical way, and I don't think that God has any obligation to answer prayers.
I agree with most of what you just said. There is for sure a lot of variables when it comes to trying to determine, statistically speaking, whether or not God intervenes.
It would be really impossible to conduct a scientific experience with prayer, just like it's impossible to say by experimentation whether a given father is going to grant a given request that his son brings to him or not. It depends. What does the father want to do? Does he think it's good for his son? Does he think something else is good for his son? Maybe his son says, I want a red bicycle. The father already has in mind to buy him something better than a bicycle.
Exactly. We don't know how often God should or should not be moving and interacting with the world in certain situations for whatever reason. So yeah, that's a really good point.
A lot of times it's by God not answering our prayers that he especially works to try our faith. A major purpose in our existence in this world is to be tested with reference to our faith, because he's trying to weed out those who will be loyal to him from those who won't. And basically, those who are faithful and who don't lose the faith are the ones who are going to reign with him, the Bible says. So every time we are in a crisis, our faith is being tested. And we think of faith as a means of getting out of a crisis. I trust God's going to get rid of this crisis. But if he removed the crisis every time we asked him to, then we would never have any tests of faith. It's like when he didn't heal Lazarus. That tested his sister's faith. That if he just healed him, that's what they expected Jesus to do. But he didn't. He waited for him to die. And then, of course, when the sisters said, Lord, if you'd been here, our brother would not have died. Jesus said, I told you, if you will believe, you'll see the glory of God. He didn't say, if you believe, you'll see a healing here, but you'll see the glory of God. And I guarantee you that if you trust God, you'll see the glory of God, whether it's a healing or something else.
Very interesting. And can I ask you one more question?
Uh-huh.
I guess there's just certain aspects of Christian theology that I've been really questioning lately. Like the idea of hell and God punishing people eternally, or even like Reformed thinking that God would almost maniacally choose, for whatever his reason is, that this person's going to go to hell and this one's not, type of thing. I've always loved Jesus. I still do. But I'm getting to the point now where, I would almost prefer just to live the rest of my life hoping that God will somehow just save everybody, kind of thing. Now, does that make me not a Christian anymore? That I don't know.
If you really want to love Jesus, and this matter of hell is a big stumbling block, let me recommend that you read my book, All You Want to Know About Hell, 3 Christian Views. because the whole purpose of the book is not so much to talk about hell, although it talks in great detail about the different views of hell. The book is about the character of God. I believe the effect of reading that book will be more to love Jesus overnight. And I believe how that's it's a book-length process, but the intention is to reveal the character of God, to be the loving God that He is, despite the fact that there's a hell. I myself have called into question whether hell is a place of eternal torment, and I'm not alone at that, because early Christian fathers didn't all agree about whether hell was a place of eternal torment. There's three different views, two of them much more tolerable than that traditional view. If you don't want to get my book, I'm not a book salesman, I don't even sell it, you'd have to buy it from someone else, not me. You could go to my website under the topical lectures. There's a two-lecture series called Three Views of Hell. And that'll give you, in a nutshell, what my book talks about in great detail. And that's free. You can just download those lectures from thenarrowpath.com. I think that'll help you a little with the struggle that you've got. And as far as Calvinism and predestination and so forth, I don't know if you've listened to me enough to know I'm not a Calvinist. I don't believe in that kind of predestination.
I've listened to every debate that you've done with Calvinism.
Yeah.
I can't tell you what a breath of fresh air it was to hear you present the other side so well, because that is something that has been a huge stumbling block for me my whole life. I can't help but look at that idea and say, he's a monster, and I couldn't serve a God like that.
Yeah, thankfully, neither Jesus nor anyone who wrote in the Bible ever said that Calvinism was true. I'm thankful for that. The things they did teach, I think, prove Calvinism is not true. But in addition to my debates, at the website there are also a lengthy series, I think it's 12 lectures, called God's Sovereignty and Man's Salvation. It's all about the 5 points of Calvinism. And I bring up all the scriptures that they use, as well as all the scriptures that refute what they use. I explain all the scriptures in their context. Anyone who's struggling with this Calvinism issue, I recommend, because these are free. You just go to our website and you listen to for free at thenarrowpath.com. The series is called God's Sovereignty and Man's Salvation. And there's also that series on the 3 views of hell, which I would strongly recommend that you, Eric, would listen to. I think it'll help you a great deal.
Thank you so much. I'll definitely look into that.
All right. God bless you, brother.
You too, man. Have a good one.
Thanks for calling today. Okay, let's talk to Thomas from Oregon. Thomas, welcome to the Narrow Path. Thanks for calling.
Yeah, first of all, I want to say
Very creepy.
yeah. My question is, I'm teaching a class for new believers at my church, and I want to make sure I get this straight when I talk to them about temptation and everything. And you said in one of your lectures about the devil, that temptation was sin. If we have God, tempting thoughts or whatever, and it's a temptation that we haven't sinned yet. And I agree with it,
We do originate evil thoughts if we are evil, if we have an evil heart. Remember, Jesus said that we are like trees. A good tree cannot produce bad fruit, and a bad tree can't produce good fruit. He assumes that all people either are governed by, if you want to put it maybe in its bluntest form, submission to God or rebellion against God. If I'm submitted to God, that doesn't mean I never have temptations to sin. It doesn't mean a bad thought never enters my mind. But it's not really coming from me, because I'm submitted to God and my heart is the Lord. Paul said, if I do the thing that I hate, then it's not me that does it. It's sin that's causing me. Now, he said that twice, actually, in Romans 7. And so, we do sin, but we don't want to sin. If we really want to sin and we just want to get away with it, and maybe we're embracing a religious, belief so that we can somehow feel that we're going to get away with it, be impressed by religion. we're fooling ourselves, of course, because being a follower of Christ is having a changed heart, a heart that is now directed toward God. And everyone who's been truly converted knows what I'm talking about, because they now want to live a holy life. They don't do so perfectly because we are flawed. The flesh lusts against the spirit, and the spirit against the flesh. And these two are contrary to one another, so we don't always do what we want to, it says in Galatians 5:17. But we want to do what's right. And Paul talks about that in Romans 7. With my mind, I